They have spent $260,000 to get a job, to get an education, taken 2 years off of earning money. So all in are probably at close to $500,000 investment. And the 23% of them do not have a job because the cheese moved. During their 2 years there, the jobs that they would have gone back to, investment banking, consulting, so forth, those roles are no longer in the same level of demand because of what AI can do. That's a 20% increase from 2023 and a 100% increase from 2022.
Wow. I liked starting every podcast with immediate value for the viewers. Right now, everybody is talking about artificial intelligence. It seems like everybody is talking about AI in the same way. How are we going to talk about AI differently in this episode?
The take I have on with AI is that it is important that we learn how to create more, consume less as it relates to technology, but do it in such a way that we're developing our young people to be what I term as AI irreplaceable. And that is understanding that AI is a tool to help us be more effective. It doesn't need to replace us, though it does provide the opportunity and the need for us to really develop new and more ingrained skills and traits that aren't necessarily taught today to young people in order for them to be able to fully leverage the potential and the capability of AI, but do so in an ethical and way in which it truly helps humanity more broadly.
Absolutely. So again, let's stay on the accelerator and keep hitting it hard.
Okay.
What ways do you see AI reshaping the way that children are learning and thinking right now?
When we think about AI, it is going to allow for personalized learning pathways, which are huge. It's going to allow, rather than having one teacher in front of a classroom trying to teach to the middle or even the lower edge of 20 to 30 students, we will now have personalized learning pathways that are customized to each child in that room. That's going to allow them to develop their skill sets at an accelerated pace. So it will no longer be a one-size-fits-all curriculum. With that, though, it's important while we're not leaving people behind, which is kind of the mindset today, we also allow those that have the opportunity to accelerate to continue to move forward. So that's a key part of it because the teacher will now be working with AI to customize unique plans for each child, understanding who is accelerating in math, who might be accelerating in reading, who might need additional thought and processing and learning how to spell and how to phonetically sound out words. These are essential differences that actually our current school system isn't set up for, but that's where it's going to go. In addition to that, a big shift is we're going to be moving from memorization to application. And what I mean by that is knowledge is now universally accessible. And so creating a school environment where your child is going to be instructed and then required to restate that back on a test loses its value in the age of AI when children and adults can all ask and seek out the information as needed. So instead, we've really got to shift around application. How do we handle retrieving or getting information that they need in the moment that they need it? So it's not about memorizing facts. It's really about critical thinking, creativity, and problem solving skills of how do you apply the fact that you now have access to all that knowledge. But it goes even beyond that. When you talk about it, we need to develop AI literacy as a core skill for our kids. We've got to talk about interactive and immersive experiences to where it comes to life and they're not just staring at a screen. And then there's also the upsides of immediate feedback and iteration and preparing for this new future.
How do parents interact, engage, and integrate with this experience? Because we're talking about children, but again, the children are going to go home. They're going to talk about what they learned from, with, by artificial intelligence. Where do parents fit into the picture? Is there a way for parents to balance that? Do parents have to be helicopter parents with this technology? Or is there a check and balance already built in?
Great question. And I am a huge proponent. Part of the global conversation I'm driving is around the importance of intentional parenting. That's very different than helicopter parenting. It's very different than hands-off parenting. It's about being exceedingly intentional today in the age of AI. And the analogies I like to give is if you think about parenting today, parents were raised by parents who had the knowledge and the experience beforehand and could pass that knowledge and experience on to their children. Today, with technology and AI, it is moving so rapidly that actually families need to intentionally learn and grow together along the continuum of AI. Now, in the past, the analogy I'll give is you're ready to drive a car, you're 16. Do your parents just simply hand you the keys to the car? No. Did it happen to you? Certainly didn't happen to me, right? As a child, I needed to learn and read and memorize rules and requirements. I needed to take a test, a written test. Then I needed to actually practice behind the wheel with either a parent caregiver or maybe a third party, driving school. And then once I reached a level of proficiency, then I could go take my actual driving test to demonstrate that I have the knowledge and the experience and the ability to effectively use such a powerful tool, right? A car is an extremely powerful tool. It provides access. You can go get a job. You can go do extracurricular school activities, but it also could be a weapon and could be very dangerous. If we think about AI and parenting, it's not all that different, except here's the challenge. The parents are going to have to learn along with the child along the way. The parents are no longer going to have the inherent experience and knowledge from their past. And so that's a big shift for parenting right now. So parents play a huge role. Not only do kids, get opportunities for exposure in the school, but it's usually the parents or caregivers, right, that are providing the personal devices. And when you think about parents, many will say, we missed the boat with the internet, we missed the boat with mobile, we certainly missed the boat with social media. We simply just said, oh, our kids will figure it out. And we realized, nah, that's not the right way to approach that. With AI, we've got to be intentional as adults and as caregivers to ensure that we're setting the right tone and the direction for our young people.
So two things, and
Yeah.
yeah, they kind of go, they align with themselves in tandem. But when using your analogy, when a parent teaches a child how to drive, it's kind of a one and done thing. As soon as the child understands how to drive, they can basically get in any car for the rest of their lives because the technology doesn't necessarily change over time. With artificial intelligence, we're constantly told that this is the worst it's going to be, and if we understand that tech is rapidly accelerating, then AI today is going to be different from AI in, let's say, 2 years. How does a parent balance that perspective of the technology you teach your kids today is going to be very different? So you have to stay with them through the life cycle of this technology.
You absolutely do. And I think, the philosophy you're raising is, when I first started to learn to drive, if I build upon that, right? It was a Volkswagen Bug. I had to learn how to put gas in the car. I was told I had to learn how to change tire before I could drive it so that if I had a flat, I could be independent and do it. Today I own a Tesla. It's a very different environment. How do you actually, leverage it from an electricity standpoint? And it's a very different car. The 0 to 60 level on a Tesla is very different than what it is on a Volkswagen, what it can do and what it means, right? So I think, the analogy that hold is that parents are used to historically having the knowledge and the experience, but that's gone away. And so now with that, that means we as a society have to shift to being lifelong learners because of the rate of change and what's happening. And so your experience with AI just a month ago, let alone 6 months ago, is very different than your experience today. So the way in which parents can do that and the importance is ensuring that it becomes an integral part of your family conversations. And I talk a bit about it in terms of family values, not politically in nature, but just simply family values. And every family will have their own unique family values. Whether it's about when do you say please and thank you? Do you put a napkin in your lap? Do you hold a door open? Do you walk into a store and take something that you haven't paid for it? What is, the route that you take in terms of trying to create new content? These sorts of family value discussions that you have in home actually now need to happen with AI as well, because families are on different sides of the spectrum. Some are like, we're all in with AI. Let's use it every single day. Give yourself the competitive advantage. Have it give you all the answers at school so you have more time to do other things. And others are like, nope, don't use it at all. I want you to learn everything, the historical way. I want you to build all the skill sets independently. And the reality with most things, it's somewhere in the middle. But the reality is, with these family values, we have to discuss what matters. And so when you create something with AI, are you going to acknowledge that you created it with AI? If you stumble in a homework assignment, what's your family values approach? For example, in our family, uh, it's been a while since I have done algebra. And so we have a rule in our family. My daughter has to try the problem 3 times on her own. And then she has to reread the chapter in the book. And then she has to tell me, hey, I couldn't figure out how to do this problem. We try to solve it together where I ask her questions. If we still can't solve it, we'll use Photo Math or another AI product online and we'll get the answer. And it'll take us through step by step so that she can learn how to do it. But then she has to do it again on her own without the AI assistance. That is a very different level of intentional parenting than what's happened in the past. And that's where you have to have your family values discussion. Your family value may be try it once. If you don't get it, go to AI, get the answer, and do it. But you're having an intentional conversation around how do you plan to leverage this technology and this skill.
I apologize if this question is quite application focused, but how does a parent, because I'm not a parent,
Yeah.
I want to be a parent. I'm already thinking about how I'm going to talk to my son or daughter about technology. I told you on our previous call that I want to have a sex talk, a drug talk, and a technology talk with them to really get into
Yeah.
exactly what's going on in the world. How does a parent have or start to have that conversation with their child? At what age should they start? How do they tailor it to certain ages? And how do you deal with the social aspect of artificial intelligence? I can tell my kid one thing in my house. They go to their friend's house, their friend's parents have completely different family values. I can't talk with you. I'm working 2 jobs. Use AI and figure it out. Now there's quite a dichotomy there because my child may continue going to that friend's house
Yep.
purposefully to, engage in a different kind of learning style, quote unquote. How do we deal with that?
So there's a lot wrapped up in there. So let me try and dissect it down and feel free to dive deep. I use wherever I miss any of the points. But I wrote the book and I wrote the book Raising Entrepreneurs, Preparing Kids for Success at the Age of AI, because I believe it starts at the earliest of ages. And I'm trying to drive this national conversation and this global conversation around how the role of parents and caregivers are shifting. And that is, we can no longer delegate the responsibility of education purely to the schools. If I just take the United States as an example, we have 13,000 school districts in the United States, highly decentralized, each of them deciding independently how they will execute state mandates around education. And that creates a huge gap in where students have experiences and exposures and where they don't. And so that is one of the reasons why I say it has to be intentional from the parent and the caregiver in terms of what they're trying to do. But it can start very early because you and I talked about this in our pre-call, right? I call this generation the glass generation, not because they're brittle or they might break, but because they have been raised on glass. They have been raised to consume and simply just scan. And the shift we need to make is we need to shift them to where they're creating. And creating starts very early, starts at the youngest of ages. Now, mind you, I am not proponent of saying no tech. That's not my mantra at all. I think we have to learn how to effectively work with tech. And so that's where I think the creation comes in. So you asked about the talks that you want to have with your children. At various levels, you can have different conversations of depth and discussion. But even at the various earliest of ages, you can start to have the conversation around, if you think about a young child, typically many kids love to have stories written or stories read to them. And there's nothing more exciting than to have a story written that includes you or your pet or your family or the things you enjoy. And so you have an opportunity when you're reading, a young child, one of the multitude of books that you'll read, whether it's about brown bear, or whatever book it might be, you can say, you know what? Now let's talk about, we've read this book. What if we use artificial intelligence to help us come up with our own book? Rather than brown bear, guess what? Your favorite stuffy happens to be a green dinosaur. Let's create a story about green dinosaur, green dinosaur. What do you see? And the child can start to interact with AI there where they're actually not even realizing they're learning prompt engineering. They're learning how to ask questions. They're also learning how to understand, does the answer make sense or not? Which is one of the important things around hallucinations and bias with AI and everything else, is you start to have the question and say, okay, we told AI that, your favorite stuffy is a green dinosaur, and that, you have a sister and a brother and that we live in this town. But AI came back with a different, different mantra, a different story. Why do we think they did that? So all of these opportunities, even at the earliest of ages, provide the opportunity for the parent and the child to talk about the strengths and the limitations of AI. Now, as you move up and through this, it starts to shift, right? When you talk about it at a young age, it's like AI and technology is designed to support our ability to make things happen. Um, and so when I think about it, there's a lot of ways we could go in the conversation, but if you think about Sam Altman's interview this just last year with Oprah Winfrey, he was asked, kind of like, where do you see AI in 10 years and what's the potential? And his comment was, and Sam Altman was the founder of ChatGPT, is that the only limitations are really what the human mind can think of what's possible. And I like to underscore that because learning models are what they say in their name. They're learning models. They've learned from the past. And we're not at the point really with generative AI where it's predicting the future and creating a new future. There's still the human capability that is the ingenuity and the engine behind new ideas. So when you're working with young kids, it's about helping them create the ability to create things in a new way. And so working with kids at a very young age, right, raising them from the beginning to think about how do we create with technology, you can do it by simply asking questions such as, if you could have done one thing today that would have made your life better, what would it be? And get them to say, it could be as simple as, what I would have liked today is have an extra 12 hours in a day. Or, what would have been better, made my day better today is if, my friends didn't, get so upset over a basketball game. And you could say, all right, well, let's ask AI some of these questions. How could we actually leverage or use these things? So when I think about as a parent raising, it's about how do you work alongside, just like we're talking about personalized tutors, work alongside AI to give that exposure. Now, your question went a lot of ways, so I may not have answered specifically everything you're asking for there, so feel free to fire back at me. Where else would you like me to dive deep?
So again, let's say the parent
Yeah.
is going along with that in one household, but their kid, obviously, you want your kid to be as social as possible, especially at a young age, develop the social skills, make eye contact, etc. If they go to another household with different family values around artificial intelligence, how do parents deal with that difference? The child, importing different
Yeah.
like foreign family values in that way. It might be an abrasive way to put it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great question. I think as a parent today, you typically will, before you send your child off to a play date, you'll get to know those parents. You'll talk with them. You'll see them at school functions or what have you. You might even stop by and have the first play date where you're there together and you kind of get the sense for the house and the family and you talk about differences. I'm a real proponent of very open communications with your children. And that is to say, there are no right or wrong family values per se, right? Every family has their own family values. So part of it is learning to understand and appreciate that people can approach challenges differently. But when an open dialogue is to say, in our household, though, we're going to follow this mantra. When you're at somebody else's household, I want you to still keep our family values. You need to be strong enough to be able to say, you know what? You may use AI. Let's say a child's going over to another child's house after school and they're working on their homework. One child's allowed to immediately use AI, but in your household, your child's not. An important skill is learning, resilience, is learning leadership, emotional intelligence. It is helping the child know to say, that's great that you want to use AI. I'm going to do it without AI and see where I go and have the confidence to that. The parents can also have the conversations with it. In some households, um, they're more apt to serve treats or have ice cream, and in your household, they're not. It's all about that balancing act. The child may learn to say, you know what, I can have one, but not two. That's fine. This is how we do it in our family. It's not all that different. It's important that you establish those conversations early on with your child so that they know what are your family values and how you're going to drive it. And I have found, I do a tremendous amount of work with the Girl Scouts and also with local sports teams, that I see it every single day that kids come at problems in a different way. If they're able to articulate it, which is part of learning the skill sets, not just knowledge, kids typically respect that. And if they don't, then you pretty much know that's probably not the right friend for you.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for going into detail with each one of those. I
Yeah.
apologize because I'm overbearing as a podcaster with questions sometimes.
Not at all. This is great. I love the conversation.
One thing that we always forget is that we're human. We talked about AI and technology accelerating, but it feels like it's a lost conversation of should technology accelerate? Do we want technology to accelerate? What if we're not prepared for technology to accelerate? What do the parents do that are uncomfortable with accelerating technology? They don't really have the time to teach their kids. Is there, one thing I want to get to is the reestablishment of community, being able to trust your community, being able to not pawn your kids off to other parents to teach, but at least trusting that the people in your community can pick up the slack if you need it. How do parents deal with that? Not being Luddites, but just being unfamiliar or uncomfortable in this digital era.
So you asked about how, when parents are very busy, how can they stay actively involved? And I really say it starts with small steps. And if you can integrate new patterns and new activities, it just becomes commonplace. So you don't need to make it overwhelming at the outset and say, I've got to become this expert on AI. You don't. Take small steps and grow with your child. For example, on our Discovering AI LinkedIn company page and on all of our social pages, every Friday we release a new thing called Mind Spark. And is designed to just be a very simple, easy activity that families can do together over the weekend or anytime, but we really kind of target during the weekend when there's more downtime and the chance to come together and explore using AI together. It can be as simple as taking a photo of anything in the area and say, what does this piece of art tell you? And seeing what the responses are and engaging with it, and then having everyone say, well, how did they view it? Or even talking about, so here's my personality, here's what I like to do, here are 5 things that I always use. What are my superpowers? And seeing how AI comes back with it. It's designed through fun to have an interesting conversation around bias, around ethics, around insights, around what is made up hallucinations, what is real. And it creates this unique engagement with parents in a fun way. You can ask almost any parent. If you ask the question, how was your day today? You'll typically get an answer that says fine. That doesn't really tell you very much. So through some of these activities, we're actually empowering parents to think about it differently. Rather than asking a kid, how was your day today? Say, if you could have created anything today that would have made your day better, what would you have created? And then say, all right, we've got to pull out your phone or I've got my phone. Let's ask ChatGPT or Gemini about it or Claude or Perplexity. Hey, what would have made my day better today? What made my day better today is if I had, ability to fly from baseball practice to home so that I could have eaten dinner in between faster rather than eating at 9 o'clock. And then let AI come up with, okay, well, here's how you could create a magic carpet and what it would do or what technology would be required. You're just finding ways to create an engagement and a conversation in a different light. Really, truly important. In addition to that, though, it's the parent challenging the child, the parent Absolutely. You asked earlier about helicopter parenting. That's never the answer. The question is, how can parents create an environment where they're asking the right questions and encouraging their children to explore and experiment? And oftentimes that can be offline, not just on technology, because there is so much you can learn through entrepreneurial activities that are offline that you can then later apply in an online setting.
Let's get back to education.
Sure.
So I'm a parent. I have a couple of kids. I'm talking to them as young as I'm talking to them about artificial intelligence, from when they're 3 or 4. I'm talking to my community, talking to my neighbors. Whenever they're going on play dates, I'm talking to the people around me of how they're using artificial intelligence. But for the next, if for the next 14 years, the majority of their time is going to be at school, hopefully, if things go well. How are schools using artificial intelligence right now? How should they be using artificial intelligence? How do we even have that conversation with schools on the
Yeah.
differences? Because again, I apologize to tack this on at the end. We can take our time with it. But if we understand that AI is accelerating and we understand that schools are very, very static organizations, this creates a really big dichotomy that we're going to struggle
Yeah.
with.
So a lot in there, I'll try to break it down. As I referred to, the United States school system is 13,000 school districts, completely decentralized, even with the executive order of the President of the United States recently that said we're going to bring AI into the classrooms. It will take years for that to actually matriculate. In addition to that, just the pure education of the teachers through the college system to then get them feeded into the school system will take years. Current professional development at the school district levels is really focused on improving academic performance and standardized testing. The whole system of education needs a complete overhaul. There are, and it's not to say that teachers don't want to. It's not how they're measured and how they are, reviewed and performed. And so you have a lot of teachers that want to see this move faster, but in an environment that's very constraining. And so, we have a situation where you have organizations like code.org or Khan Academy or Discovering AI that are really populating the external resources and programming that is allowing kids and parents to derive the understanding and the knowledge they need through outside sources as well. So I think we're going to see a continued push of working with schools to provide outside resource in education material to help them thrive and grow because it will take time. Right now, right, schools are absolutely mandated by their performance on standardized tests. With that, though, we do have some schools, charter schools, private schools, that are going all in on AI, and they view their role is to help kids learn how to effectively use it. There is a great program out of Austin, Texas, that each of the kids have their own personalized learning for the first 4 hours of the day, 3 to 4 hours of the day, and then the rest of the school day, they all get to pursue their own individual projects and areas of interest. Um, I think we're going to see more and more of that evolve over time through this personalized learning and what's needed. But that doesn't help the current generation. And that's where I'm really focused on how do we make sure that the current glass generation isn't left behind? And how we make sure it's not left behind is through podcasts like what you do with Gen Z and what we do with other parent and school and student organizations, which is we have to show that now more than ever, intentional parenting is essential because we cannot outsource it to the school. We're not like Estonia or India or China, but let's think about Estonia here or Finland or other countries where it's a centralized education system. And you could take a top level mandate and feed it all the way through the schools immediately. Estonia has been doing mandatory computer science for 12 years. There are countries that are highly integrated into AI computer science. That's not going to happen in the US. And in terms of Canada, I'm not an expert on that, but welcome your thoughts in terms of the implications for the Canadian population. And so it really does mean in the school systems, parent and teacher collaboration, working together on What are family AI values? What are the teachers' values around AI? It is also outside organizations providing the education, the training material that is not yet integrated into the school systems to ensure that both parent and children have the opportunity to get that in partnership with the schools is going to be an essential way in which we create this knowledge understanding. And I give the example of, let's take Google, for example, Google Gemini, highly integrated into Google Classroom and all the programming. But the AI system of Gemini was only available to kids 13 and older. But in April, they made the decision to make it available to all kids, 0 to 12. And Google sent an email out to the parents that said it's default on. If you want to change that, you need to go through a myriad of steps to deny access to Gemini. By the way, you need to teach your kids that AI is not a real person, that it can make mistakes, and that they need to fact check it. So even Google is putting the responsibility on the parents to ensure that they're having the conversation, the dialogue with the kids. So there is no real easy answer, whereas in the past, we as parents could feel that we could send our kids off to school and they would be adequately prepared. That is no longer the case today because, in fact, the school systems are not structured to make a change this rapidly to meet the needs of what is now widely driven and used in professional settings. And as we think of our kids today, we need this generation to be prepared to thrive in the age of AI, not left behind and left out of this huge learning situation.
Does the glass generation become more fragile or more resilient in the age of AI?
I hope they become more resilient. Um,
How do they become more resilient?
I think they become more resilient when they learn that it is on them to take on the responsibility to try, to fail, to test, to look at what their skill sets are. So, in the United States, there's a phrase that, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps, and that entrepreneurship has been a huge part of the American economy, and that we don't sit back and we don't wait. Yet, this generation and even the generation to come have been trained to just simply consume off devices. And that's a real dichotomy. And so, how we make sure they don't become fragile is by helping them see that their opportunity to thrive is going to be when they take on what I call the 6 steps or the 6 traits of an entrepreneurial mindset, right? We're talking about adaptability and resilience. This is really about, can they change and recover from setbacks? Critical thinking and problem solving. Are we teaching them how to ask the right questions and find the right solutions? Essential when you have the opportunity to simply just ask AI for the answers. You have to have that critical knowledge. Creativity and innovation, right? We can be caught in a situation where all we do is repeat the past if we're not driving a generation to create and be innovative, to think about what's possible. Really important skill sets. Emotional intelligence and leadership, that's where, AI really has, they can state answers, but there's no emotional connection, right? And the human touch and the need of how do you drive connections with individuals to take action? People follow people. Really important. Technical fluency, digital literacy, critical trait. And are we teaching that? And as parents, it's really important that they are modeling that as well. If they are not modeling that, then their kids are going to be stuck in this environment of simply consuming. And then lastly, it's really about this entrepreneurial thinking and initiative. We have to get this generation to realize and to take that step up that while AI can provide them the answer, it's up to them to take the initiative to put it into motion. And that's really where there's a big difference in this place. And so those traits are going to be essential in order for this generation to not be fragile and instead to be resilient and to thrive. And how do they learn those? You'll notice those 6 traits, not a single one had to do with knowledge. They all had to do with taking action. consuming less, creating more, taking action. And parents and caregivers and school systems need to model that. Because I like to give the example that, knowledge is now universally accessible. If you have an internet access, it really breaks the haves and have nots, no matter where you are. And the US school system is also derived largely funding based upon property values, which has created huge inequities over the years. But if you now have universal access to knowledge through access to the internet, then you level that playing field. And anyone with the initiative and drive and the desire to make a difference and move forward has the opportunity to proceed forward. That is huge in terms of the opportunity and democratization. It's also one of those things where I talk about it where, I happen to be a single mom. And in the past, let's say a single mom, a single dad comes home from working two jobs. Their kids aren't really set on, their homework. The parents are tired. They don't really have the access to the information. It used to be the old Funk and Wagnall encyclopedias or whatever else, right? But they now can use AI to get the right information that they need to be able to ask the right questions in an instant to help your child thrive. The example I'll give is, and this can happen anywhere. My daughter came in to my office at 11 o'clock one night, the day before her literature final in middle school, and was like, Mom, I'm not prepared for my literature final. I don't know what to do. She had read 4 books this year. That was The Tale of Two Cities, The Hobbit, Julius Caesar, and one other one that I'm forgetting. I don't remember reading those books, but I could ask AI. My daughter, who's going, is finishing 6th grade, has a literature final on these 4 books. Help me come up with a few questions I can ask her that will help her think about how to think about character development and the interconnectedness between these 4 books. Instantaneously, I had a list of questions that I could ask her that would help her be adequately prepared without me having to remember what those 4 books were about. So it totally democratizes now as a parent if you know how to do it and you're intentional. Even if you're tired, you come home from 2 jobs, you've got whatever else going on in your life. Every parent can now help their child thrive in an academic environment in a very different way.
And it's so much easier for the parent. That's brilliant. And it really emphasizes the connection between a parent and child. If that parent is able to emphasize that connection, AI is not going to do it for you. You have to take those first steps. I do want to backtrack a little
Yeah.
bit. You called the generation the glass generation. Now, I know what you mean, but I don't want young people to hear you say that and say, it's just another person of a different generation talking badly about us, because you're saying that for a reason, and you're saying that with the purpose of information and compassion. What do you mean by glass generation? Why are we called the glass generation? And also maybe we can talk about on our pre-call the difference in my understanding of glass versus your understanding of glass.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked that question, the chance to clarify that. I call it glass generation because they're being raised on devices. If you go to a restaurant today and you see a family there with kids, how often are the kids on the devices?
Almost always.
You go down Costco or a grocery store and the kid is in the cart, 2, 3 years old. The kid is holding a device. This is a call to the parents as to why I call them the glass generation. Because just like one generation was called the tube generation or the TV generation, they were just put in front of the tube to kind of babysit. Parents today have used glass generation, have used glass devices as babysitters, and that is playing a huge disservice. I get and understand why that may happen, but we want to know why our kids at 14, 15, 16 don't want to talk with us. It's because we've given them a device to soothe themselves for the prior 12 years. And now when they're 14, 15, we want to have a conversation. They're going to go to the device to ask and look for answers and for, connection than talking to us as families. So when we think about this glass generation, it's really important we break that cycle. It is really important we talk about family values. It's very important that as parents, we're learning with our kids together about AI and about technology. That we're not just handing it off to them and say, you go figure it out like we did with social media or with mobile or with internet. It's recognizing that that didn't work, that there is a need for structure and engagement and conversation to really drive this process forward. And so it's essential that we actually do this in a way that is really constructive. And so the glass generation is simply, they've been raised on screens. They are digital literate, but they're not yet digital leaders. And so they're digital literate. They can move through any digital glass device imaginable because from the earliest of ages, they've learned how to push and move and have no fear that adults have that they might screw something up. So they're very digital literate, but they are not digital leaders. Digital leaders are ones who can apply ethics and values and insights and question and teach others. They will learn that together through the parent caregiver school connection with the students.
So I'm a parent. I understand my child is a glass child in that way. And I've already experienced my kid. Let's say I'm a bit of an older parent. I have a Gen Z or maybe a younger millennial or an older Gen Alpha, however permutation. But I've seen my child struggle with social media. That was a very new technology. It was a very immature technology. Now it's more mature with Instagram and TikTok, but for 10 years around there roughly, it was very immature. My child's brain was changing all the time. But the ability of my child to think and be entertained and the preferences and all of that, the politics of them were being influenced by social media. Now AI is here. Social media changed the world over 10 years, like immutably. We have presidents using social media now. In order to have a voice, you need to be on social media. It's completely different to 15, 20 years ago. With artificial intelligence, parents might be thinking, is this going to be the same thing? Is this going to be the same issue of my child going completely bonkers and berserk because a couple of centralized companies own all the data centers? Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Perplexity, etc. What do we tell people about the difference between social media and AI? How do we calm their fears? Tell them that they still need to be aware of what's going on, but tell them that being a Luddite and, bunking off AI is not the answer.
I would say that if you talk with most parents, they believe we missed our responsibility with internet, with mobile, and with social. And there is more than enough knowledge and understanding now about how challenging, hurtful, damaging social media can be. And I say can be because there's lots of good things about social media, but how hurtful and damaging it can be if it's unchecked or if there aren't the conversations around family values and there aren't discussions around how it's used. And so I think parents are more aware and fearful of AI because they don't want to repeat that, yet they're not sure how to avoid it. And that is where, when we talk about lifelong learning and being highly intentional as a parent, that is why we're driving this global conversation around. Now more than ever, we need intentional parenting to be involved in the age of AI. And we can't just leave it to the schools. The schools will figure it out in 20 years. We don't have time to lose 20 years worth of kids without guidance and direction on AI. And so when we think about it, it's pretty amazing when you think about the rapid rate of growth. ChatGPT had 1 million users in 5 days, 100 million users in 2 months. They've got 180 to 200 million active monthly users. You add in Gemini, they say they've got 100 to 120 million users, Claude 25 million, you name it. It is ubiquitous in terms of certainly at the professional level. And so when we think about this, parents need to realize that this technology is not going away. It's an integrated part now of the workforce, and we have to develop our kids such that they can effectively use it to ensure that they're successful when they get through with their school systems. And this is where, for parents, um, using your own values and common sense around helping kids realize that when they see a picture, they're really the first generation that doesn't know whether or not that picture is real or not, right? And so we need to have those conversations. And when there's a lawsuit going on right now over, a presidential voice over that was not real. So when we think about this as families and as parents, there's so much good that can come from technology, but unchecked and undiscussed, you put the power in the hands of a few to make those determinations. Now, it's unclear how the tech world will fall out relative to this. Right now we have countries coming up with regulations around social media after it's been out into the forefront for so long. We have closed systems with Gemini and with ChatGPT, and then we've got Llama from Meta that's seeking to be all open source and available to the public. It's unclear yet to see where that will play out. But in the meantime, most parents aren't going to be involved in those decision-making elements. They need to be highly local, highly micro to their own family. And that's where we really have to talk about these 6 essential traits, how we need to talk about our family values, and recognize that there's some things AI is really good at and some things that it's probably not as good at, and understanding those differences. When we think about it from a work standpoint, I used to be the chief marketing officer of a Fortune 500 company. It's called NetApp. I had a $100 million budget and 300 employees. I could run that function today with 50 people. What used to take weeks to get a press release out the door can be done in under an hour. There's huge productivity gains that then allow us to think bigger and differently. There are huge opportunities to reduce mundane, repetitive activities and allow us to think creatively about what's possible. Can we tackle climate change? Can we, travel to Mars sooner? Can we figure out how to address, issues of animal extinction and opportunities? There's so many things we could solve if we take away mundane, repetitive activities that we consume a big portion of our life. So there is real upside to it. Yet at the end of the day, the importance for parents and families are jump in, start small, try AI, do it with your family, and have the conversations around your experiences with it. That will drive the growth that they actually need.
We talked about jobs AI will take away. I want to double click on that. What jobs will AI not take away as well?
So, I think almost every job will have some aspect of that job changed given the potential of what AI can do. The most, some of the more obvious jobs include like radiology. AI and computer vision can already more effectively read X-rays and detect anomalies better than the human eye. That doesn't mean that you don't still need a radiologist to interpret that and to compare it against trends and to know the insights of the patient and then be able to deliver that information. So a portion of that job is very much changing. When you look at jobs that exist today, like I'll give press releases as an example. If you were thinking you were going to go up through a PR firm and you would be writing first drafts of press releases and working through story angles, AI can do that far more effectively by taking best use cases of historical pieces. Yet, how do you pitch the reporter or the newspaper? That is still going to be a human aspect of making the personal connection and being able to sell that person on why this story should come to the market. So every single job, I think, will have the opportunity to be impacted in some way, shape, or form by AI. You can already look at it in terms of fast food restaurants. Why does McDonald's and others offer you free fries if you use the app to place your order? Well, in California, it's $20 an hour minimum wage for someone to work at a McDonald's. That makes it pretty clear quickly why a store like a McDonald's wants to automate through AI as much as they can to reduce their human workload and hourly wage. Yet, at the end of the day, what do people do if those entry-level jobs are going away? You can also take retail. You can walk into a mall today, grab your clothes, put them in a bin, and through radio frequency, it'll tell you how much you owe and you never interact with a retail clerk again. Those were jobs that young people used to cut their teeth on, learn how to handle customer service issues, learn inventory, learn money management. The bottom rungs of the corporate ladder, of the career ladder, are going away. So that's why, through raising entrepreneurs at earlier ages, of doing entrepreneurial ventures as a kid, we as parents need to facilitate our young people learning those skills that they're no longer going to have the access to get those entry-level jobs to do them. So when you think about what will still be there, though, there are absolutely new jobs that are going to come online. For example, right now, there's a huge need for people that can teach and understand prompt engineering. But guess what? That job's going to go away too. Because now already when you use AI, if let's say you use Canva or Gamma or Suno or any of these apps, and you write up a prompt, it now says, would you like an AI generated improved prompt? Because AI knows how to create an even better prompt. So while computer science majors have declined and moved to prompt engineering is now being impacted. So it comes back to that adaptability and resilience and lifelong learning. Every time the technology takes a leap forward, something new will be created. We don't necessarily know what that new is yet, but people need to be prepared and conditioned to know that life is no longer static. Years ago, you would spend one career with one company. That went away a long time ago. It's now no longer will you stay very long in one job function. Those job functions are going to change. So if I were to summarize it, I would say expect the change. And your push, your individual push, is to make sure you've adapted lifelong learning and are willing to adapt to the new roles that are going to continue to come forward.
I want to offer some pushback because we've been in perfect
Right?
agreement the entire time.
All right, go for it. I love it.
So in 2018, again, Jeffrey Hinton was saying that you shouldn't be a radiologist, you shouldn't study it, it's going to go away very soon. But it's 2025 now, and people are still able to get a job as a radiologist. So not that you're incorrect, but if
Mhm.
people are listening to this and saying, well, I've been hearing this for so long. I've been hearing that young, and I wrote this in my book, so I'm in total agreement with you on
Yeah.
what we're saying. I'm not trying to be sanctimonious or anything, or ignorant. But people have been talking about this for so long that jobs are just going to go away. And we saw a real decline when ChatGPT came out of, customer service jobs, of even, white collar jobs like computer science gigs, software development and engineering, etc. But it hasn't happened en masse. We've been experiencing a lot of layoffs. We've been blaming the economy for it. Some people are being conspiratorial, saying that they're just replacing these people with AI in big tech, whatever. But we haven't had this shock to the economy as people have been predicting for so long. So that introduces a real hesitancy for people to even believe that this is going to happen. Because again, you and I can write books about it, we can do as many podcasts as we want, but until people actually see it happening, unfortunately, they're not going to believe it's coming. So how do we deal with this, incongruency with reality?
I would share that I think Hinton's perspective is directionally accurate. There's always ups and downs with everything. Nothing's actually a linear line. It has been proven that computer vision is more effective at radiology than the human eye, but to our point, the job starts to shift. And so part of that is the efficiency gains will happen in terms of the ability to have AI read the radiology x-rays at a faster rate. So the total number of radiologists will decline. And right now, I think we have a little bit of job preservation going on a bit, but it is changing. And it's changing in a way that is both threatening to companies and threatening to individuals. But I don't believe it has to be. This is where I come back to we have to be thinking about What are we inventing and what are we going to be creating in the future that's different than what we have today? But let me give you two examples. Duolingo just announced, their CEO, that they were going to be shifting to almost a predominant AI-driven workforce because the human workforce was too slow to come up with the new programming that they needed. Huge backlash, massive subscription cancellations for them because people are fearful and they want to keep their jobs. So actually, his decision to come public on that and such the backlash really means other companies are simply going to start making those changes without publicly announcing them. And so as you see those changes, it's going to be a look back historical where we see the big shifts because companies don't want to take and cannot take the risk to have a massive backlash, even though it makes sense for Duolingo to offer a better product to its customers through leveraging AI to create more language uh, interactive engagements than relying on humans to do something that AI can do better. Now, what Duolingo needs to figure out is there a way to redeploy those humans in a way in which creates greater growth or using creativity to come up with new uses? For example, Duolingo is now looking at math and they're looking at other ways to learn things. So they can use the human ingenuity to drive that. Another example I will give is we also have to realize that it's going to hit certain sectors faster than others. And, I went to Harvard Business School. I went 6 figures in debt to come out with a degree. Great opportunity, great learning for me. And I was at the point where the internet was really just about to take off. And I saw a huge shift. I came out to California, consumer products, and within 3 years, tech had taken over the entire valley. If you look at AI and what's happening, and I'm actually going to read a quote out of my book on this one. The Wall Street Journal just in January 2025 reported about the challenges the elite business schools are having. The article shared that 23% of the spring 2024 Harvard MBA graduates were still looking for roles 3 months after their graduation. That is huge. They have spent $260,000 to get a job, to get an education, taken 2 years off of earning money. So all in are probably at close to $500,000 investment in getting an MBA degree. And the 23% of them do not have a job because the cheese moved. During their 2 years there, the jobs that they would have gone back to, investment banking, consulting, so forth, those roles are no longer in the same level of demand because of what AI can do. Automated trading is huge. And what's interesting is that's a 20% increase from 2023 and a 100% increase from 2022.
Wow.
Those are big numbers. And so I think our audience needs to be aware that historically looking back, we will see the drops in the big numbers. But I don't know if there's going to be as much talk about it because of the backlash that will happen in the near term.
Let's end on a positive note. What is one
Okay.
piece of advice you can give to kids and one piece of advice that you can give to parents to offset this bleak and dreary and pessimistic outlook and frankly pessimistic reality? A lot of people are looking at AI and they just hate the fact that they're living in this generation, in this era. How do we restore hope and optimism for the future?
Perfect. So I would like to say I don't want to be bleak, and I don't think that's how we need to view it. I think we have to be realistic that what is the playing field today has changed. And so we have to embrace as a society that the playing field has changed. And the sooner we are willing to acknowledge that and embrace that, we have huge opportunities to create a very bright and very different future. When I look at, sorry, when I look at, for example, my daughter, who loves to watch Star Wars movies, we have the potential to create that world now with technology and what it's capable of doing. So I think the future is extremely bright. Do we have the opportunity to figure out how to address climate change? Yes. Do we have the opportunity to figure out how to address the pollution in our oceans? Yes. Do we have an opportunity to literally create a level playing field. Whereas education used to be dominated by property rates and the haves and have nots, with knowledge now being universally accessible through access to the internet, and the emphasis is on your individual drive and determination to grow, develop, and learn, there are opportunities now for everyone. It no longer matters where you come from. Do you come from the rural South? Do you come from a country in Africa? Do you come from the Himalayas? Do you come from the Appalachian Mountains? Wherever you are, if you can get access to the internet, you have the same opportunity to learn and grow as anyone else in this world. That fundamentally now means we can take advantage of the universal talent that is available worldwide that used to be restricted based upon access to education. So, my word of advice or opportunity, or what I would like to share, is recognize the potential and the power of AI and technology to significantly help you create more and move away from simple consumption. And use this as an opportunity to realize one of my favorite quotes is by Eleanor Roosevelt: "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Now more so than ever, what you dream, you can leverage technology to help you achieve that in reality. You can leverage 3D printers now to help prototype. You can go to libraries to help you do that. You can go to your schools to do that. You can leverage technology to reach out to the masses of your target audience for feedback, for insight. You can use technology to think through how do you problem solve and work through detailed, scientific studies. There are kids that are in their, in high school that are creating, recognition and cures to cancer now because the young people haven't been told they can't do it. So while they're called the glass generation, it may end up being, rather than that negative of this was their dumb consumption through being handed these devices, there's now been the family values and the discussion that says, how do we leverage the glass generation to achieve what has never been achieved before? And that is through recognizing that the future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams, that they are no longer limited based upon socioeconomic, location needs, education, race, creed, what have you. If you have the willingness for lifelong learning, you're willing to embrace the 6 traits associated with an entrepreneurial mindset, and if you're going to challenge yourself, there really are no limitations about what you might achieve. And I'll underscore the importance of adaptability because we're talking about schools needing to change, colleges are going to need to change. I've got a 529 plan for my daughter. Will she go to college? I don't know. That's 6 years away. What will the role of colleges be 6 years from now? It's certainly not what it is today. So I am trying to teach her right now the importance of her focusing on lifelong learning, being adaptable, knowing how to demonstrate emotional intelligence and leadership, demonstrating digital fluency, taking initiative, being creative. These are the gifts that I, as a parent, can give to my child. And if you're currently of this generation, these are the traits you also need to take the initiative to build for yourself. And if you do, I fundamentally believe, well, I don't know what jobs will be needed 5 or 10 years from now. I do know jobs will be needed, right? And so with that intent, with that mindset, anything is possible.
I love it. If you had a magic wand and you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. If I could solve one problem, I would love to solve the challenge humans have to recognize and appreciate the differences of each other and to find a way to live harmoniously together with giving the space and the room for individuality.
What gives you hope in the world?
The current generation gives me hope. You give me hope. The fact that you reached out and wanted to talk about this and your view of how you're trying to help the Gen Z think about their future in a different way, to realize that we can look at it pessimistically or opportunistically, you've given me a chance to help share that. I look at my daughter and I look at young people. I just did an event with Cultivating Hope this week. 15 students from inner city of Birmingham, Alabama, brought out to Silicon Valley to be exposed to technology and AI in a different way. And what I saw light up in their eyes is when you show and provide access, that you demonstrate that they have the potential and the ability to achieve their dreams. When I see those young people take advantage of these opportunities and now realize with knowledge being universally accessible, there's nothing that can hold them back other than their own desire. That was what gives me hope. I see in young people today that they're facing a lot of challenges in terms of everything that's changing. But if we change the mindset from challenges to opportunities and just say, look what we as our generation are going to be able to create and do, we are going to be able to solve some of the most pressing problems in the world, and we're going to be able to look beyond our world. That's pretty powerful and something no other generation has had the opportunity to be part of.
Amy, this was jam-packed with information and statistics and just great conversation. So I thank you for that. Where can people find your work online, find you online to support you?
Oh, thank you so much. We have two websites, discoveringai.com, which is where we run workshops and programs. We also have discoveringai.org that has free resources to help people bring in the entrepreneurial mindset, the family values that they can use. I encourage people to sign up for our Discovering AI newsletter. They can find me on LinkedIn at Amy D. Love. That's D like Diane. We also are on social media, Discovering AI, as well as Raising Entrepreneurs. So people can just simply look for Discovering AI or Raising Entrepreneurs. And of course, they can buy the book on Amazon if they want to dive deeper into the discussions.
Fantastic. Amy, can't wait to have you back on the program. All those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Have a great day. So appreciate the time.